Good afternoon. Welcome to today's presentation in our Collegiate Recovery webinar series. My name is Tim Rebolt, and I'll be your host. We're joined today by Blake Schneider from Mississippi State University. The topic of today's presentation is Collegiate Recovery 101, Where and How to Get Started. These webinars are hosted by the Association of Recovery in Higher Education, ARHE, in order to support the growth and development of the collegiate recovery field. Just a few reminders and logistics items before we turn things over to Blake. Today's webinar will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube and the ARHE website. You'll be able to go back at that time and access all the information. If you have any questions for our presenter, you can enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. There'll be some time at the end for question and answer. We'll get to as many of those as we can. Any supplemental materials such as the slides or handouts will be emailed out to all webinar attendees at the conclusion of the presentation, as well as the link to the recording. If you're having any technical difficulties or have any logistical questions, you can feel free to message us directly through the chat box. You can just send it to all panelists and we'll get that message and help out best we can. And then finally, we're always looking for ways to improve or topics to cover, any other feedback. So please feel free to reach out anytime and let us know how we can, continue improving this experience for you. Now I turn things over to Blake. Blake serves as the program coordinator of the Collegiate Recovery community at Mississippi State University. He received his master's in communication studies from the University of Alabama with an emphasis in group leadership, strategic intervention, and social work. Serving in the program coordinator position, he has taken a startup organization founded in 2014 and transformed it into a well-established program on campus. In the summer of 2017, he was named as the Southeastern representative for ARHE. In this position, he proactively takes measures to help with the startup of collegiate recovery efforts in the Southeastern region while looking to enhance collaboration and cohesion among universities throughout the Southeast. Thanks so much for joining us today, Blake, and I will turn things over to you.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you all for hopping on. I hope you're there. I know that you're there, even though that I can't see you. This is my first ever webinar, so hopefully it's good, and I really appreciate y'all being on. I know for me personally that I've been in and out of Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, and I'm just on and off the whole time. So I'd like to start off maybe a little bit differently and just take a second for us to arrive real quick. So for me, I'm just gonna make sure my 2 feet are planted on the floor and take the deepest breath that I've taken today, and maybe set an intention of what I want to get out of this hour. And so if you want to type that into the chat box, whether it be a question or what you want to get. Of course, you're here because you want to learn more about collegiate recovery and starting up a program, but if there's something specific, please drop it in there and we'll let Tim work his magic and get those answered at the end. So just to share a little bit about myself and my experience with this, for me, and this is kind of wild to think about. So I've been at Mississippi State for, it'll be 5 years in July. And then before that, I was at Alabama and I was a part of their collegiate recovery community starting in 2012. So 8 years of experience with collegiate recovery. And it's what I know, it's what I love, it's what's close to my heart. And it's my story, right? And to be a part of Mississippi State's story and helping start up their program and to see the growth that we've had has been really cool. And, I know a lot of times that, like, at least for me being in the field for 8 years, that you hear like, okay, like, how do you start a program? Like, that's a pretty normal or standard topic, but I think that it's so important. And it's something that'll, it's pretty simple and straightforward, but I do think that as a field and as a profession, that these recommendations and that the tactics that we employ, they'll change, they'll grow, they'll shift, and they'll, become better and better. So today I'm going to give a brief overview of just collegiate recovery and what it looks like kind of nationally, some guidelines, some standards, some programming, ingredients, funding, where programs are housed, that sort of thing. And then I really do want to focus in on where to start a program and how to start a program. So those questions that I always get of what comes first and, how it starts on a campus and that sort of thing. So to get into it, to start off with just what collegiate recovery is over in an overarching sense. So it's a grassroots movement, as you probably all very well know, and I'm not going to get too deep into the history, but even in the past 10 years, it has really expanded and grown in a miraculous way. We have about 140 collegiate recovery programs that are card-carrying members of the ARHE, and then which is a good card to carry, just in case you're curious. But and then we have 200 programs overall, so about 60 that are in the effort or startup phases, right? So it's this national movement, and it's a really new field, right? Like we're growing, we're learning something new every day, and the really cool thing about collegiate recovery is that programs can be so nuanced and they can have their own flavor and their own flair, right? So you can be really you know, heavy with housing, or you can be really heavy with programming or research or academics, whatever that looks like. So we have that, and then we, you know, we continue to shift and we continue to grow. And my hope really one day is that, you know, I don't see myself working in another field while, you know, while I'm working. I could be wrong, but one day I really hope that, you know, I'll be able to look back and say that there is a collegiate recovery community at every single institution of higher learning, not only within the United States, but I mean, worldwide, right? Like there's no reason that students shouldn't be able to get that support. And so I think the more that information we have about this topic and the better prepared we are to start programs, the more it will behoove our movement. So something else that I should mention too, so I'm the Southeastern rep for the ARHE, and I get calls all the time from different parents or people who are interested, and they ask me about large Division I universities and if they have programs. And a lot of times I have to tell them no, which is kind of, it's tough for me to wrap my mind around, and I know I have that lens, like, and I'm really polarized because this is the work that I do every day. But I do think in the not too distant future, we'll be at a place where if a university doesn't have a collegiate recovery community, then they'll be seen as kind of like they're behind the times, you know? So a little bit about what a collegiate recovery community is and just the standards and guidelines that we as the ARHE has set forth. They're listed below. I'm not going to read all of them off, although I will say that these are fluid, these are shifting. We continue as an organization to look at these, to tweak these, to revise these, to make sure that they are working for our constituents, that it's a living, breathing recommendation that makes sense for the people who use them, who implement them. I will say that one of the big ones that I personally kind of, I would say that this is my soapbox, and what better place to have a soapbox than a webinar, but is to have paid, qualified, trained, and ethical professionals who support students in recovery. I'll dig into that a little bit later, but I think hiring a point person on campus who their sole responsibility is collegiate recovery is really important for starting a program and ensuring its long-term success. You know, and of course we have to be housed within institutions of higher learning, dedicated space. We provide programming that's free. We provide them with a community of students who offer peer support. I would personally say that that's where the magic happens of a collegiate recovery community, is the community that students are able to develop amongst themselves, and then also the ability to collaborate with campus partners and stakeholders. So the different areas of support that a collegiate recovery community provides. So the first one's being recovery, and that's kind of intuitive, right? Of if a student comes in as a freshman, or if they're coming in as someone who's beginning their pathway to recovery, that's the main area of support that we provide, is recovery resources, right? Whether that be meetings or one-on-one meetings, again, that peer support. And then like teaching life skills, coping techniques, anything we can do to help them build that recovery capital. And so the recovery services that we provide bring them into the conversation, right? They get them in the door, and then the academic support that we provide thereafter keeps them there, right? So whether that's academic advising or having a computer lab or study hours, that sort of thing. So recovery gets them there, and then academics keep them there. And then of course, like that social piece and having those friends who are going through the exact same things that you are as a college student, I really think is what enriches the experience and what gives students who are in recovery that college experience, right? Because for me, at least, until I found the CRC at Alabama, I didn't really have a college experience as a recovering student. It was just, my life was just meetings and school, and there was no in between, right? And so once we get a student settled and we give them the platform to build some recovery capital, that social comes into play, and college becomes fun again, and they're able to make, you know, lifelong friends and that sort of thing. Several CRCs provide financial support. So I know Mississippi State, all of our students who have more than 6 months of recovery get a scholarship just automatically for being enrolled in the CRC and having more than 6 months of sustained recovery. And this is just speaking for our program, but we have family support as well. And Mississippi State kind of has this motif or theme of being a family. And so we have that within our community, but we also try to extend that to our parents and offer them support as well and integrate them into our students' experience. Of course, and then career support, right? So helping students go on and making sure that they're ready to graduate, that they're going into productive jobs, that their, you know, interview skills, their resumes polished up, whatever that looks like. So really being there from a student from the day that they walk in and say that they don't want to use anymore, they don't want to engage in that addictive process anymore, all the way until when they graduate and become alumni. So this part that I'm about to talk about, programming and engagement, I think this is really where individual collegiate recovery communities develop their own sense of identity, and we're going to talk about that as well. But you know, different CRCs offer different things, and that's the beautiful thing of it, is if you're at a university and you're starting a new program, the sky is really the limit, and you can create whatever you want, and it can look however you want it to look. And I say that with the caveat that for me, I believe that the best programs are student driven, and that we're continually listening to the students and we're garnering their feedback and we're making sure it's what they want. Because if it's not what they want, then why are we doing what we do? You know what I mean? So for me, and this is my own personal belief, again, actually, so I should have said this like 10 minutes ago, but all of this is just my own personal beliefs, and you can disagree with all of it, and that's completely fine. Anyways, for me, the most important part of any collegiate recovery community is that last word of community, right? And whether you say CRC or CRP is not of much consequence, but community is so crucial. And it's so crucial, I underlined it, I bolded it, and I italicized it. It's the only point that has all of those distinctions. But again, time and time again, we know that from the research that's been conducted in our field, that the number one predictor of an individual's recovery success is relational. And so the stronger of bonds you can foster with students, the more successful individually they're going to be. And then also as a group, the more accountability they're going to have and responsibility and that sort of thing. But it should overall, you know, it should provide a safe place on campus. Universally, that should be something that a CRC provides. Scholarships is a piece that can be provided. Study space and study hours can be provided. Recovery housing, so you know, some programs provide a really high level of housing, and then some might not provide that at all. It really just kind of depends. I will say this much. This is a common thing that I see is a program will be looking to start up and will want to start recovery housing at the exact same time. Again, it's your own personal preference of what that looks like. I would say maybe hold off on that and make sure that you really build a solid foundation before you hop into that recovery housing piece and adding that in, because when you start talking about students living together, there are a lot of liabilities that come up and a lot of difficult questions that come up. And so if you're starting a program and building the foundation and you have recovery housing on the top of that in the very beginning, that can be difficult. Connections on campus, and this is something that I think is so crucial, is being able to connect students with different places, whether it's, you know, athletics or financial aid or counseling or health and wellness, student health center, any of that stuff. Just having, like, my students can come to me and be like, hey, do you know someone for this? And I'd be like, yes, and send an email or give a call. Social events, I think that's huge. having something normalizes this, collegiate recovery experience, whether it be recovery tailgates or travel opportunities, free food. I will say this much: if there's one thing I've learned in my time at Mississippi State, it's that free food will get students in the door no matter what. So if you're like curious about how to do things or something, like get some free food. I promise you it will work. It works for my students. We have a community lunch every Tuesday, and students just come and eat food, and that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. We have recovery night as well. So a lot of schools have a recovery night. And that's generally, I can't speak for all schools, but generally that's a speaker meeting on campus that kind of raises awareness, and someone shares their experience, strength, and hope with whatever fellowship or recovery that they subscribe to. And then seminar, I would say most programs have seminar as well. I know that a lot of the ones that I interact with and know about do. And seminar is really, I would say, for Mississippi State, it's the heart and the soul of what we do. It's where we get together. It's where we foster community. It's where we have de-stressing activities. It's where we provide students with life skills. It's where we build that community. And again, the cool thing about all of this is that when looking to start your program, this is kind of how you can shape it and make it your own, whatever that may be. So the key ingredients to a healthy collegiate recovery community. So administrative support. I found that working at an institution of higher learning, if you don't have administrative support, it's going to be really hard to get anything done. So finding that champion on campus. Physical space, the actual brick and mortar. I know that that's so difficult on college campuses, especially with all the programs and students, everything continuing to grow, and universities looking to grow out or grow up. But that's really critical. Staff, a dedicated staff member, I touched on that. Students, of course, you need students to have, that's the whole reason for the season, right? We can't have the party if they're not there. But having an application process to make sure that, you're kind of bringing students in and they know that they're coming into something intentionally. And then having a board, whether it be advisory or working, and I would say that when starting a collegiate recovery community, having a board right off the bat is so critical and helpful. I know, at least for me in my experience, having a group of people that I could go to and ask if they had a connection with this department, or if they knew how to raise funds from these people, that sort of thing was so helpful in the beginning. And a lot of times I get the question too of which one of these should come first or could come first, the kind of the chicken or the egg thing. And my answer is whatever shows up first, just embrace it and be grateful for it and run with it. You know what I mean? Because my experience has been that once you have one thing, it'll lead to the next, right? So where are programs housed? Generally, more often than not, they're within student affairs. And a lot of times, from what I see, I would say student health services, whether that be the counseling center or health promotion and wellness, or just actually like a standalone department itself. But we do have a lot of programs too that are housed within academic affairs and are more research-based. I think that's noteworthy to say as well, because the research that we do in this field is really important, and that's what pushes us forward. Where are they located? And I know I kind of touched on this, but really you got to get in where you fit in, you know what I mean? So a lot of times it'll be a suite of rooms, or it'll be a single room. Very few programs actually have a standalone building, and a lot of programs have shared space too. But again, whatever you can get that will work for your people is critical. And God, I can't remember what study this is from, but physical space is the #1 predictor of a CRC success. So having a place where students know that they can come, they can check in, they can hang out, it's their safe place. And I've had students before, they got triggered on campus, and they immediately, they knew where we were, they knew where we were located, and they came running to our house and sat down on our couch, and that was their safe place. And I think that's so critical. Also, a lot of our students take naps on our couches. I'm not exactly sure why, just in between classes, but I would say I probably have 10 pictures of 10 students just passed out on the couch. I'm gonna put a collage together one day. Anyway, How are programs funded? So normally programs are funded through the university having like a general operating budget or private donations. Although I will say that with the opioid epidemic and the according response, that a lot of grants are coming out now, like opioid response grants, and those can either be state or federal. I know that at Mississippi State we have a few state grants, and we also have a federal SAMHSA grant as well. So those are certainly worth looking into. So where to start? This is really the meat of what I wanted to get into today is where to start on campus. You know, and the answer is any of these places, but more often than not, there has to be a champion on campus. And so when I say that, what do I mean? I mean that there actually has to be someone with a beating, you know, they have a heart and a brain, and, you know, they like want this to happen on that campus. If there's not a physical body there that wants it, then it's going to be really difficult to start it, right? So having that person, and even if they're off campus as well, I know at Mississippi State, the founder of our CRC board, they came and they visited the student counseling center and they said, hey, we need to have this at Mississippi State. And 2 weeks later, they had a meeting with all of Student Health Services, and that's how our program began, as the champion showed up and helped start our program. Something else I think is really important is the evaluation of space and place, and not so much brick and mortar, but also where it makes the most sense for a program to fit in, whether that be the Dean of Students, whether that be under University Health Services, whether that be academic affairs, you know, whatever that may be. I think it's really critical that when starting a program that you make sure, given the size of campus, the resources offered on campus, that it does fall under the appropriate department, or that it, you know, starts off as a standalone or a satellite of a department as well. Conducting a needs assessment, right? So gathering that information from National College Health Association. So getting those reports, getting the biennial reports, I think is how you say that word, right? So like seeing what those numbers are on campus of students who drink, students who use, students who struggle with depression, anxiety, those different process addictions. And I think that that can really help in justifying the need for a program on campus. A presentation to key campus partners always goes over, is always helpful as well. A gift. So a lot of times, you know, if a program comes with the promise of money, that'll really help, right? Like follow the dollar and you'll find the answer. So I think a gift, I've seen that help programs start a lot as well. And then this is something that worked well at Mississippi State, and I've heard has worked well at other universities, and that I would recommend as a mass message to the university. So like a campus-wide email where all students, staff, and faculty receive this thing of like, hey, we're looking into starting, you know, collegiate recovery supports on this campus. If you're interested, you know, anonymously contact this number or this email, that sort of thing, right? That's one really quick way to, you know, kind of gain some support and get the word out there really quickly. And then I included a hope and a prayer at the end of that, because, you know, I think that really you have to start small and dream big, and that wherever you can start, you take it and you run with it. And I think for me too, if I could go back to when I started at Mississippi State, just like letting myself know that like everything was going to be exactly the way it was supposed to be, and the things that I thought were big setbacks or obstacles actually ended up being the greatest, you know, things to push our program forward. And knowing that any obstacle that, you know, I was able to meet, like knowing that I was going to be able to overcome that was really critical. And also too, like, and this is just, you know, my own personal kind of thought, but like when I got to Mississippi State, I knocked down so many doors and I bothered so many people. Within 2 months, I think people were like, who's this Blake guy? And why is he here? Why is he still emailing me? You know what I mean? Like, and so I think it was really crucial to make those connections on campus too. And this actually transitions into the how to start, but so we'll transition into that. But executing strategic planning, right? So like being really intentional about the community that we want to create, and the missional, visional, and branding that we want to have, right? And so being intentional about that and thinking through of like, okay, what's our tagline going to be? What's our mission going to be, or vision? What do we want to be known for, right? Um, and I kind of touched on this as well, but connections. And this is the one where I underlined it and highlighted it and or no, I didn't highlight it. I bolded it and italicized it because I think connections are so critical. You know, your net worth is directly proportional to your net worth. So the people that you know um, can really help make those connections and find those champions on campus, right? Because a lot of times when you start a program and you begin to make those connections and you start that outreach, you'll find that there's a lot more than just one champion on campus. And that's certainly what I found when I began making those connections. The next one I have bolded as well, and that's hiring a paid, qualified, trained, ethical, and dedicated professional. I want to say that with the caveat that I absolutely could not operate without my graduate assistant. I think in working in student affairs, I think graduate assistants are the lifeblood of any university. They're, you know, the arms and the legs. They're what help us accomplish what we need to accomplish. But in my experience, I've seen a lot of programs that will fill that professional staff with a graduate assistant position, and then, you know, in a year or 18 months, that person will graduate and then they'll fill it again and again and again and again. And there's a lack in consistency and constancy, right? And so students in recovery don't feel like they have that like go-to person. And that in no way is to knock graduate assistants. And I'm certainly, you know, grateful for, I think any university should be grateful for any allotment of resources that they get. But the game changer for me is when you hire that full-time 40-hour a week person. That's really when a program will take off. The next thing that I have is put together a board. And so for us, you know, I think having a mixture of people who can make connections on campus, a mixture of people who can make connections in our local town and community, and then also just different champions of recovery who are willing to be donors, right? I've always heard that a working board has three different types of people: donors, doers, and door openers, right? So getting those people, whether they're on campus or off campus, will really, it's a great way to hit the ground running. I touched on strategic planning. Again, I think that's so critical when starting a program, thinking about the branding that your university has, what your university is known for, and thinking through what you want your program to be known for. And start with, so collect data and feedback from day one. And I say that as being like, I'm not good with research and numbers and all that stuff. And I really like, God, I wish I was better, but I'm just not. But I will say collecting that data from day one is so crucial when it comes to, you know, making a case for the program on campus and for demonstrating the value and the worth of the work that we do. I've gotten better with it with time, and it really is like, I just did our annual report yesterday, and we made contact with 14,000 people within 1 year. Like that's pretty killer, right? The next part is start with students, learn with students, build with students, and flourish with students. I think everything starts with students and ends with students. That's the beginning and the ending of everything. And so finding that group of students and asking them, like, what do y'all want? Like, what do you want this community to look like? What do you want to get out of it? How would you define this? You know, what do you want to be known for? And starting with them and then staying with them all the way through. I know for us at Mississippi State that I've really, like, in the beginning, I had to knock down doors and I had to kind of take that leadership role and start that mission and vision and branding and that sort of thing. But now it's at a point kind of where the students really guide the direction of our community. And I'm just on the sidelines there to kind of like do the behind the scenes work and just make it what they want it to be, right? And I think starting small and dreaming big. And so I say that to say that, like, we had a meeting, an anonymous meeting on campus that was on Wednesday nights at 7:30. And for a year and a half, we had a student who was dedicated. That was his meeting. He showed up, and he, like, I would say maybe 50% of the time, he was the only one that showed up. He made a pot of coffee and he would sit there and he'd text me like, no one came tonight. and it was so tough and it was so disheartening. But now that's like the main meeting that students on our campus go to. There's like consistently 15, 20 students at that meeting. It's the one that I always refer students to go to, because it's just a bunch of young people like sitting around. So sticking with it, and staying with it. The challenges that we bump into a lot is identifying students, right? Like I remember when I showed up, I was like, I can't just like hang a flag from our building and say, are you struggling with drugs and alcohol? Like, come here, right? Like, so I think identifying students is always tough. Marketing is always difficult. You know, there's this idea that because we're in recovery that we can't let our voices be heard or known. I will say that that's not inherently true, right? Like, so we, like if a student is willing to be showcased and highlighted, I will take that all the way, and I will, you know, showcase them and show their accomplishments as much as they want. But I do think that it's really important to get out there and to share that message on campus. Fundraising can always be difficult in the beginning of starting any organization, and a lack of understanding and a lack of support. A few kind of notes that I wanted to share on the challenges, just things that have gone well for us. So we, at the beginning of every fall and spring semester, we do classroom presentations, and we go to, I would say, about 50 or 60 larger lecture classes at the beginning of each semester. And we have students go in and they just say, hey, this is my name, this is my story, I'm a part of this community, it really changed my life, I was struggling, you know, there's support here for you, like you're not alone. And then they'll leave their cell phone up on the screen or whatever. And we have gotten a ton of new students just by going to classrooms and doing those classroom visits, you know. I think social media is really critical for getting out and reaching college age students. And then I think once you have students who are in the CRC, like much like money begets money, when you're either fundraising or going for grants, students beget students, right? And they begin to share with their friends and the different groups that they're with on campus. And then tabling on campus too. We've had students where we have a table with our information, you know, and just staying out there and doing it once a week, and people pop by and they say, oh, I have a friend or a family member. And even if they're not in recovery, they become allies and that sort of thing. So that's just a few of the challenges that I routinely see. So the benefits of why the CRC is important, and we've kind of covered this, but it creates a safe place on campus for students that are in recovery. And it also is a really cool recruitment tool, right? Like, so this is one of my favorite stories. I had a student who's an alumni now, and he's pre-med because our students are impressive. I'm very biased and polarized, but they're very impressive. But he was in treatment, and his mom was calling different schools in the Southeast to see which schools had a collegiate recovery community. And so she was on the phone with the university, which shall go unnamed, and her call got bounced around to a few different departments. And finally, she got put on the phone with a counselor. And so she asked if they had a CRC, and the counselor said, no, we don't have a drug and alcohol problem here at this campus. And the mom literally just laughed a whole bunch and then like hung up, right? Like she just laughed and she was like, okay, like goodbye. And like that was it. And then she called us, and I was like, yes, we have this program, we have sober tailgates, we have meeting, you know, all that stuff. And so that student came to Mississippi State, and like we were able to bring them to our university. You know, of course they pay the tuition, all that stuff. So like it's a great recruitment tool, and that looks really great. Like, you know, your university loves it when you recruit for them, right? And not only when you recruit for them, but when you retain those students and you help them move towards graduation. It's really critical. So, and that's really my story, right? Like that's what brought me back to school, and that's what helped keep me in school. Again, why the CRC is important. So more than 40% of student nutrition involves substance use. That's a pretty astounding number when you think about it. And I'm actually, I said I was terrible with research. If I'm not mistaken, I think those numbers are higher now. I think it might be closer to 50%, but don't quote me on that. But we can see that there's a pretty big gap in between needs and services. And so, you know, I mentioned this earlier, I really feel like it'll be, you know, in the not too distant future when we look at different universities, and if they don't have a program, they're going to be behind the times, right? like it's essentially the equivalent of a university not having a counseling center or a dining program or that sort of thing. So there's a big gap there, and that's why y'all are attending the seminar, and that's why we do the work that we do. And again, not going to spend too much time on this, but we know there's also like not only the capital of bringing a student to university, but just the human capital that we lose every year nationally. And this is only alcohol use, right? Like this doesn't even include other substances, but we lose a lot of students in this country due to substances, which is heart-wrenching. But hopefully the work that we do will translate to these numbers going down in a significant way, right? A little bit more of the benefits in the direct. I really love this graphic, Austin Brown, and I think he collaborated with Ashford, if I'm not mistaken, put this together. But out of alumni, and this was presented in 2018 in the National ARHE conference in Houston, if I'm not mistaken, but 96% of students are actively, CRC alumni are actively in recovery. That is remarkable. That's astounding, especially when we look at treatment centers, and like a really, really good treatment center has like a success rate of like 25-30%, right? Like that's pretty incredible. So I always like to show this graphic just to show how impressive our alumni are. And also, like, for me, like this just demonstrates that when you provide recovery supports in a long-term setting, like that is the best key for sustained recovery, right? Without recurrence to use. So, and I've talked to the students about this, to no end, but not only are we providing those long-term recovery supports, but we're also equipping students with an education, right? And so hopefully they should have some purpose with that. And for me, when I see a student who has got an education that really makes sense for them and they've had those long-term supports, if they're living a purpose-filled life, they've developed a lot of recovery capital, and very rarely do they return to use. And then here I think I'm going to show off my students a little bit. Yeah, there's all my graduates. I love this part. So the indirect benefits, it reduces stigma of addiction, right? So every time a CRC student walks across the stage, they reduce that stigma of addiction because they can say, I did it, I graduated. It might not have been 4 years, it might have been 6 years, it might have been 12 years to get a 4-year degree. That's fine. They walked across the stage, right? They helped reduce that stigma. And then it also strengthens the local recovery community. And this is something I've seen happen twice in my life, which I love. But the more students that come to university, they really, they start going to local recovery meetings. And I've heard it time and again of older people in those meetings saying, I love that these young folks are showing up. I wish I could have gotten it when I was y'all's age. And you see that over and over again. You see like big groups of like, 20, 30, 40-year-old students showing up, and people just love it because like it shows the recovery community that education is possible as well. So it really reinvigorates that, that recovery community. And it also, when people know that there's a collegiate recovery community on a campus, it kind of reduces that idea that it's a party school, right? And then here's some just student perspectives that I really enjoy. And I actually will read these out, even though that's like PowerPoint 101, do not do. But I wouldn't be sober if it weren't for the CRC. I was honestly just about to drop out, but I joined the CRC and I found my home, I found my people. I would have never gone to college if I hadn't found out about this program. The center made it really possible for me to meet people that were in recovery and quickly establish a good network with them. I think I would have relapsed and dropped out or gone into severe depression, and it played a crucial role in my first year of sobriety. So again, just from the student perspective, knowing that they wouldn't have gone to school or that they wouldn't have stayed in recovery without it is really, really cool to see that. God, and that's my favorite part. Like this time of year, watching people graduate, so cool. It's very bittersweet, but it definitely makes the work that we do so important. So let me see. Yeah. we have some time left for some Q&A. I'd really like to dig into some other pieces that people have or whatever that might be. So thank you all for listening. I really enjoyed that, and hopefully y'all got something out of it. I'd love to field some questions now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Blake. Just as a reminder to folks, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen to throw questions in. If you're more comfortable speaking, you can also, click next to your name over on the participant side and click raise your hand, and we can, if we have time, we can allow some folks to talk and ask questions that way as well. So we have about almost 10 questions and just under 20 minutes. So Blake, if you're fine, we'll just kind of start running through them. One question that came in as you were talking about graduates is if you do anything special for your graduates, and maybe you can answer both kind of what you generally do and then maybe what you're doing now, with the outbreak and everything and having to move everything digital.
Fantastic question. So normally when things are not in the midst of a global pandemic, we have a graduation celebration, like a graduation dinner, and we'll go out to kind of like a fancy dinner for us. And so we invite the graduates and staff members and significant others and that sort of thing. We just have a nice dinner and celebrate our graduates. All of our grads get padfolios just because, they're about to go out into the working world. So to kind of hopefully equip them with something to give them a little bit of credibility, right? So like, I got mine right here, the Mississippi State CRC portfolio. So they get that, and then they get the chance to share what the CRC meant to them. I always try to invite administration to those get-togethers and celebrations, right? So like inviting the VP of Student Affairs or AVP or whatever that looks like, just so that they can kind of see that student success and know that our program is making a difference. So that's what we traditionally do. And also we'll either have it at like a fancy restaurant, or we'll kind of go back and forth with we'll have it at our athletic director's house or our VP's house, that sort of thing. So kind of those, key partners that, we made connections with. But what we've done, we just had our graduation celebration on Monday. So this couldn't be more clear in my mind. We had a Zoom graduation celebration, and I surprised the students. We had 4 graduates, 5 including our GA, but I surprised the students twice. So one, I invited their parents on, and they were a little bit bummed about that in the beginning, but they got over it. And also any student that wasn't graduating filmed like a little 20-second, proud of you, love you, miss you, you're gonna go on to do great things sort of thing. And so we put together 5 different videos, and then we screen shared on Zoom and watched all of those. And then the graduates had a chance to share kind of what the CRC meant to them and their future plans. And then I gave their parents an opportunity to share, and they really didn't like that, even though they did. And then we kind of wrapped it up from there. Also, I told everyone to bring dessert, to enjoy a sweet treat at the same time. I think I was really the only one who took that seriously. I don't know why. I was the only person eating cake there, but that's fine. So yeah, so that's what we've done in person and then online as well.
Perfect. So we got a few questions that were submitted as folks registered for this webinar. One was from Cal State Fresno, talking about their program kind of going through this cycle of starting and stopping. And I guess the question was kind of around, any advice you would have for a program kind of in that stage. And, they asked directly about hearing about your success. So maybe you could talk a bit just about, the perseverance and the consistency piece. And I guess any advice you'd have for a program that kind of, maybe gets some students and then they fall off, and, any suggestions you might have there.
Yeah. God, my heart goes out to you. If you're starting and stopping, that's tough. I've been there before. For me, so at Mississippi State, when I started, we had 6 students, and and I got a few students my first semester. And then I was in this perpetual cycle for like 2.5 years where I would I would graduate 2 students and I would get 2 new students. And I graduate 2 students, I get, so I was like, people like, the administration was like, what are your numbers at? And I was like, 8. We're always going to have 8 students and I'll never be able to grow this thing. And I don't know what's wrong with me. You know what I mean? Um, I think for me, something that really helped was, um, so we originally had um, a requirement of a length of recovery requirement of 6 months, where a student had to have 6 months in order to get a scholarship or be a part of our programming and like come to those, or like travel opportunities, that sort of thing. For us to like pay for them, they had to have 6 months. But we did away with that in 2017, 2018. I can't remember now, but we did away with that, and we started an introductory program where a student could literally walk in the door and say, hey, I'm struggling with drugs and alcohol, or I'm struggling with this process addiction, like I'm done, I want help, kind of thing. And that changed the whole dynamic of our program. I would say every semester I would say that we have anywhere from 7 to 10 students walk in and say, I'm done, right? And I'm struggling. So having that intro program where students can get plugged in and they don't have to have any sort of, like, there's no time or credentials or training or anything required, but just the desire to begin a pathway to recovery was really transformative for our program. And I guess like the follow-up piece of that is, so I always like meet with those students and kind of explain the program and make sure they know what's up and that sort of thing. But then I really try to stay out of it, and I always connect the new student with a current student so that they can see that it's not just me, like, hey, like running this thing, like there are other students where it's like, go hang out with them, right? And I also always try to schedule, like, if I can, like I'll try to schedule a meeting like right before the students are having a get together. I know that they're going to be hanging out, just to show that there is that kind of fun college experience piece with it. And then, I would say classroom presentations too, like getting in front of like 3,000 people at the beginning of each semester. It's like tough, and it's really like monotonous and daunting to email 1,000 professors, but it's really, it's been helpful for our program. But I will say all of that to say, stick with it. It'll happen. The students will come, and then like the stuff that you provide them with will keep them there, right? Whether that be scholarships or programming or travel or whatever. So
Yeah, perfect. Another question we got during the webinar was back to your piece about the mass email. And if you could talk about that a little bit more, as far as who you reached out to get permission and like how it worked exactly. Did you just work with them on the content and they sent it out, or kind of that whole piece? If you could elaborate a bit.
sure. So for us, we are housed under the Division of Student Affairs, and anytime that anyone within that division wants to send out an email, it has to go through the VP's office. And so I kind of pitched it, and I pitched it to my director, and then, she asked her director, kind of thing. And they were like, yeah, they approved it. And then we just came up with the content of the message ourselves. And it was essentially like, hey, there's this program on campus. We provide this, level of support to students. This is kind of an example of what we provide. And then like, kind of broke down like the support meetings that we have and scholarships and activities and that sort of thing. And like, I'll say this much, it was a delicate balance of like, because I know students like read maybe 10% of emails that hit their inbox, right? But like, so like having enough where it was like, people knew what it was, but also not too much where they just didn't immediately like not read it. And then once we crafted that message, the VP's office, approved the language and that sort of thing. So
Awesome. This next question is around maybe kind of advice for students that are ready, and the student body is bought in to having collegiate recovery on campus, but they haven't yet convinced administration. They're kind of hitting that wall. So maybe any kind of suggestions on how to navigate that common problem that a lot of students are facing on their campuses.
I love that. That's a good question. Number one, my heart goes out to you. God, that's a tough place to be. And I, as a student, I will say that I have to acknowledge it was so easy to me. It just started. I didn't have to kick down any doors. So if you are a student and you are trying to kick down doors, my heart goes out to you and my hat is totally off to you. I would say, depending on what region you are, I would get in touch with your regional representative, the ARHE, so that they can provide you with that information, whether it be resources or startup packet, that sort of thing. And then just really doing like a lot of research. I know that for us at Mississippi State, and a lot of times what I see at other universities is if an administration sees that sister schools are doing like providing that support, but they're not, that'll like a lot of times that'll be um, pretty critical, right? So like be like, they're doing that at Mississippi State. Why aren't they doing that at X school or Y school or this school in the SEC, that sort of thing. So showing that other schools in the region that are similar in size and scope, I think is always really helpful as well. And then, God, just the persistence of, I don't want to say like annoying administration or being a pester. I don't want to go on record saying that, but just meeting with whoever you need to meet with, whether it's the dean of students or the vice president of student affairs, the provost, the president. I mean, anybody and everybody. Don't stop meeting until you get, the answer that you want. You can get a million no's. You only need one yes in order for it to happen. You know what I mean? Um, and as a student, I think that this is tough. And God, I wouldn't have even thought of this as a student or known how to go about it. But if you could find a donation, like a private donor, and there's a promise of money to come with the program, that's pretty helpful as well.
Yeah, great points all around. So the next question is, how do you navigate promoting your events and services to students with the anonymity of those in recovery?
Sure. So I would say that, so like all of our graphics, all of our designs, all that stuff doesn't really include student pictures, right? So like for our recovery tailgates or a recovery night, or just any other graphics that we have, they don't really have the pictures of students or anything like that. But we do have, so like for our social media or our newsletters or that sort of thing, we have a photo consent form that students sign when they, fill out the application to join the CRC. And if they don't like, and that's totally cool. If they don't want their photo taken, they don't want to be in stuff, that's totally fine. But they like, so they know that going in, like right away, it's like, hey, if you don't want to be in this picture, that's totally cool, but it might go on social media kind of thing. So we let students know about that anytime that we're taking pictures or kind of documenting stuff and that sort of thing. And then I think beyond that, just protecting the anonymity of the students as well. Like we have anonymous meetings and, kind of what you hear here, who you see here, when you leave here, let's stay here, right? When it comes to the anonymity of those. But other events and that sort of thing, I really haven't seen, like, there's not like people busting down the doors of like our recovery tailgates or our recovery nights with ulterior motives, right? So hopefully I did a good job of answering that, but I think the photo consent form and just letting students know up front has been pretty important in that area.
Yeah, for sure. This is another question that came in before the webinar. It was asking, what is the most effective way to recruit students and gain student involvement at a large university where it can be difficult to distribute information about a new and developing program to all students? I think you touched on some of these in the webinar, but I want to see if you had any other kind of thoughts around, basically student, attracting new students and distributing the info around a program that's starting.
Yeah. I was sitting in my office 2 years ago and I was thinking about how do I connect with students, right? Because I had the flyers, I had the social media, I had all this different stuff, and I was like, I need to go where they are, right? And so that's where the classroom presentations came in. I would say that those have been the most beneficial. And this might be just a Mississippi State thing or like a SEC thing, but game day buttons are like really big on campus for like football games. And so we have like a ton of different game day buttons that have like fun little sayings on them, like never hungover, tacos not tequila, pugs not drugs, that kind of stuff. And it has our social media handle on it, and I give those things out like nobody's business. Like so many students have them. Actually, one of our students was like friends with a football player at our school on Snapchat, and like the player posted a picture of the button on the story. So like that was kind of cool, just when it comes to like a unique and creative way to get students. But game day buttons have been a cool, just kind of like mass way to get our name and our branding out there. I think classroom presentations has been really cool. And then something else as well, if you're thinking, if it's like a really large university, something that we did and that I've seen had success is we had like a widget on our university's home screen of like, hey, there's a collegiate recovery community here. And it was like on the main landing page of Mississippi State. And it was up there for like a few months. So that's an idea as well.
Yeah, great points. So in the last couple of minutes here, we got one more question, and it's around advice for all the programs now that have to be virtual, having to switch everything and make that pivot due to COVID, and any kind of suggestions for, transitioning those different offerings and meetings and everything to be all digital. So any kind of like general advice or maybe anything that's worked really, really well for you all that you could, be willing to share.
Yeah. God, and so many of us, right, are having to pivot during this time. I know for us that so when it all happened, I was kind of sitting there and it was astounding to see it all happen. But I automatically took everything that we could do online and moved it to Zoom, and kind of stuck with a similar schedule to what we had, but just made sure that it was offered in an online kind of format. And so that's worked pretty well for us. I will say something that I do personally that helps a ton is every Monday morning I send out a mass email to all of our students, and it kind of has like a breakdown of our schedule, announcements of what's going on with our community, and then I throw in like a little recovery musing, that sort of thing. So that I think that helps students like know what's happening week by week and kind of keeping them up to date with stuff. We have a group me as well. If you don't have a CRC group me, I would highly recommend the CRC group me. It's the way that I stay in touch with my students the most frequently, right? And if you have a large CRC or something that's worked well for us is we have two. So we have like a business one that's strictly just me making announcements, and then an overall one where students kind of chat back and forth and that sort of thing. So moving everything online, email, group me. And then I'll say this too, and this ties back to what I was talking about in the webinar, is letting the students guide what it looks like, right? So like letting it be student driven. And like I know for us, like next Monday we're having a meeting about what we want our summer programming to look like. And honestly, I have no idea. I have no connection. I'm not married to any one idea or train of thought or anything with our programming this summer. I really want the students to create it and shape it and get behind it. I think, if you turn it over to them and there's that ownership and that responsibility, then hopefully that attendance is better than if it was just, hey, this is what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, perfect. We got through all the questions. Appreciate that. Blake's got his contact information up on the screen, so feel free to reach out to him if you have additional things. And we'll of course send out the recording to all the attendees today. All right, so unfortunately that's all the time we have. We hope that this session was helpful and that you'll share the session with colleagues. Stay connected with ARHE to learn more about future webinars and let us know how we can improve our offerings. Blake, thank you again for taking the time today to present to our attendees. We appreciate everyone's time and hope to see some of you on our upcoming webinars in May. Thank you all for joining, and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank y'all.